Moving into my new home felt like the start of a fresh chapter. It wasn't easy affording this place, but I thought the peace and comfort of a gated community were worth it. I didn't anticipate that this comfort came with a different kind of price. The homeowner association, led by Karen. It all began on a bright summer afternoon. The community pool, nestled between palm trees and manicured hedges, looked too inviting to resist. I rolled my wheelchair to a shady spot by the water, grateful for the rare chance to relax. Wearing my favorite bikini, I finally felt a semblance of normalcy. Karen appeared as if summoned by an invisible alarm. Mid-50s, always immaculately dressed, and carrying a clipboard like a weapon, she strutted toward me, her face twisted into a mask of disapproval. "Excuse me," she began, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Are you a resident?" I nodded, trying to keep the conversation polite. "Yes, I live here. Is there a problem?" Karen's eyes scanned me with the precision of a military drone. "You don't look like you belong here. Residents are required to follow the dress code and maintain a respectful appearance. This is a family environment." It took me a moment to process her words. "I'm not breaking any rules," I replied, my voice steady despite my growing frustration. "I'm just enjoying the pool." Karen's lips curled into a sneer. "That bikini is inappropriate, and frankly, your condition is making others uncomfortable." My heart pounded in disbelief. "My condition? Are you serious?" She didn't flinch. "I'm calling security, or maybe the police. We'll see who's right." Before I could respond, she whipped out her phone and started dialing. A few neighbors nearby froze, their gazes bouncing between us like spectators at a tennis match. Whispers and murmurs filled the air. Someone even started recording. By the time the police arrived, the tension was palpable. Two officers approached, looking as uncomfortable as I felt. Karen launched into a tirade about moral decency and preserving the community's image, painting me as some kind of delinquent. My stomach churned with a mix of anger and humiliation. "Ma'am," one officer addressed me, his tone cautious. "Can you explain what's going on?" Taking a deep breath, I recounted the events. Karen's face reddened as I spoke, but I didn't care. When I finished, the officer sighed and turned to her. "She's not violating any laws or rules," he said. "Calling us for something like this isn't appropriate." Karen sputtered, her carefully crafted facade cracking. But, but she's disturbing the peace." The officer didn't budge. "If you don't have a legitimate issue, this is a misuse of emergency services." Karen stormed off, muttering about following up with the homeowner association. As the police left, I could feel the neighbors' eyes on me, a mixture of sympathy and curiosity. I stayed by the pool for another hour, determined not to let her win, but deep down I knew this was just the beginning. That evening, an email from the homeowner association landed in my inbox. It was a formal notice of violation, accusing me of disrupting community harmony and failing to adhere to dress code standards. Attached was a hefty fine. My hands shook as I read it, anger bubbling to the surface. This wasn't just about the pool incident. This was personal. I decided to fight back. The next morning, I requested a meeting with the homeowner association board. If they thought I'd back down, they were sorely mistaken. The meeting was scheduled for a week later. In the meantime, Karen seemed to take delight in making my life difficult. Notices about minor violations started piling up. My trash bins weren't positioned correctly, my garden had unsanctioned decorations, and my car was parked slightly over the line. Each came with its own fine and condescending note from Karen. It became clear that she wasn't just an overzealous rule enforcer. She was targeting me, using the homeowner association as her weapon. When the day of the meeting arrived, I rolled into the community center with a folder full of documents. Karen sat at the head of the table, flanked by the other board members. Her smile was ice cold. "Thank you for coming," she began, her tone dripping with faux politeness. "Let's discuss your repeated violations." I didn't let her intimidate me. "Let's start with the pool incident," I said, holding up the formal notice. "How exactly did I violate community standards?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "As I mentioned, your attire was inappropriate and disruptive. According to the community handbook," I countered, flipping to the relevant page. "There is no specific dress code for the pool, and calling the police on a resident without cause? That's harassment." A murmur rippled through the room. Karen's confident demeanor faltered for a split second before she recovered. "We're here to maintain the community's integrity," she snapped. "If you can't abide by our standards, perhaps this isn't the right place for you." I'm not going anywhere, I said firmly, and I won't tolerate being singled out. If this continues, I'll take legal action. The tension in the room was suffocating. Karen glared at me, her knuckles white as she gripped her clipboard. "We'll review your complaints and get back to you," she said through gritted teeth. As I left the meeting, I knew I'd rattled her, but I also knew she wouldn't give up easily. This was far from over. After the heated meeting with the Homeowner Association Board, I thought things might calm down. I was wrong. Karen's vendetta against me didn't just continue, it escalated. The first sign was the surveillance cameras. One morning I noticed a crew installing small black devices along the street and near my property line. My stomach churned when I realized they were cameras, aimed directly at my home. I confronted one of the workers. "Who authorized this?" I demanded. "The Homeowner Association," he replied curtly, avoiding my gaze. I stormed into the association office, where Karen greeted me with her trademark condescending smile. "These cameras are for the safety of the community," she explained. "Surely you understand the need for security." "Pointing cameras at my property is invasive," I shot back, "and I never consented to this." "Consent isn't required," she said smoothly. "As per the updated community guidelines, the board has the authority to implement necessary measures." I left fuming, but I wasn't going to let it slide. I spent the next 2 days researching privacy laws and preparing my complaint. Meanwhile, the cameras weren't just monitoring me. They were being used to enforce Karen's petty rules. I received a notice about unapproved plants in my garden, complete with time-stamped photos taken from the surveillance feed. Things took a darker turn when contractors showed up unannounced to begin work on a fence on my property. I confronted them, my voice trembling with anger. "This is my land. You can't build here without my permission." "We're just following the Homeowner Association's instructions," one of them said, looking uncomfortable. I called the association office again, demanding answers. Karen's response was infuriatingly dismissive. "The board approved the project to enhance community aesthetics," she said. "If you have concerns, submit them in writing." I spent hours documenting everything. Photos, videos, and statements from neighbors who had also noticed the questionable activities of the Homeowner Association. Some sympathized with me, while others were too afraid of Karen's influence to speak out. One evening, I returned home to find my driveway blocked by a truck delivering construction materials. Furious, I demanded that the driver move. As he complied, Karen appeared, flanked by 2 board members. "You're being unreasonable," she said, her voice dripping with false concern. "This project benefits everyone." "It's illegal," I snapped. "You're trespassing and tampering with private property." "Maybe you're not cut out for this community," she retorted, her tone icy. That night, I filed an official complaint with local authorities. But I knew it wouldn't be resolved quickly. Karen's connections with city officials were rumored to be strong. The next morning, I received a letter from the city inspector citing zoning violations on my property. It was clear Karen was pulling strings to pressure me further. The final straw came when my utilities were shut off. I woke up to find the water and electricity disconnected. Panic turned to fury as I called the service providers, only to be told the disconnections were requested by the Homeowner Association for maintenance. It was blatant harassment. I confronted Karen in the middle of the street that afternoon. Neighbors gathered as our argument escalated. "You've gone too far," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "You're abusing your power, and I'll make sure everyone knows it." Karen's smirk faltered for a moment before she leaned in. "Good luck proving anything," she hissed. "We'll see who the authorities believe." As she walked away, I felt both enraged and determined. This wasn't just about my home anymore. It was about standing up to a system designed to crush anyone who didn't conform. The battle was far from over, and I was ready to fight. The morning after my utilities were shut off, I woke up to an unsettling silence. The hum of the refrigerator, the buzz of the air conditioning, all gone. My home felt like a lifeless shell. Determined not to let Karen and the Homeowner Association break me, I reached out to a lawyer who specialized in property rights. His name was Tom, and he had a reputation for taking on powerful entities and winning. Tom's first words after hearing my story were reassuring. "They're clearly targeting you. We have grounds to fight this." We began gathering evidence. The photos of surveillance cameras, the construction attempts on my property, and the utilities disconnection were all carefully documented. Tom suggested filing for a restraining order against the Homeowner Association to prevent further harassment. It was a bold move, but I was ready to take it. In the meantime, Karen wasn't slowing down. Notices from the homeowner association continued to pile up. This time, they claimed my wheelchair ramp violated community aesthetics and demanded its removal. The absurdity of their accusations only fueled my determination. One afternoon, as I sat outside documenting the ramp with my phone, Karen appeared with two men in construction uniforms. Without a word, they began measuring the ramp. "What do you think you're doing?" I demanded, wheeling myself toward them. Karen smirked. "We're assessing your violation. If it's not removed by the end of the week, the homeowner association will take action." "Touch it and I'll call the police," I shot back, my voice steady despite the anger boiling inside me. Her smirk faltered for a moment before she turned on her heel and left. The contractors followed, but not before one of them muttered an apology under his breath. That evening, I received an anonymous email. It contained internal documents from the homeowner association outlining plans to increase fines on targeted individuals to force them into compliance or drive them out. My name was on the list. I forwarded the email to Tom, who immediately recognized it as a goldmine of evidence. "This proves malicious intent," he said. "We'll use this to strengthen your case." The following week, I filed for the restraining order. Karen's reaction was explosive. She called an emergency meeting of the homeowner association, claiming I was a threat to community harmony. Flyers were distributed accusing me of legal harassment and encouraging neighbors to vote for my expulsion from the community. The night of the meeting, I arrived with Tom by my side. The community center was packed. Karen stood at the front, radiating smug confidence. "This resident has repeatedly disrupted our community," she began, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "We must take a stand for our values." When it was my turn to speak, I rolled to the front and addressed the crowd. "I moved here hoping for peace and community," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Instead, I've faced harassment, illegal actions, and invasions of my privacy. This isn't about community standards, it's about abuse of power." I presented the anonymous email along with other evidence of Karen's misconduct. Gasps rippled through the audience as the documents were projected on the screen. Karen's confident facade began to crack. "This is a lie," she snapped, her voice shrill. "She's fabricating evidence to undermine the association." But Tom stepped in, calmly explaining the authenticity of the documents and the legal implications of the homeowner association's actions. The room buzzed with murmurs, and I could see doubt spreading among the board members. Despite the mounting evidence, the board voted to postpone any decisions, claiming they needed time to review the allegations. Karen's influence was still strong, and I knew this was just another delay tactic. But the meeting wasn't a total loss. Several neighbors approached me afterward, offering their support. They admitted they'd been afraid to speak out against Karen, but my courage inspired them. The next morning, I woke up to find my car vandalized. The tires were slashed and the words "Get Out" were spray painted across the hood. It was a clear message, but it only strengthened my resolve. Karen and the homeowner association were willing to stoop to any level, but I wasn't backing down. With Tom's help, I filed a police report and added the vandalism to our growing case. As I stood in my driveway, looking at the damage, I realized this wasn't just a fight for my rights. It was a fight for everyone who'd ever been bullied by people like Karen. This was war, and I intended to win. The vandalism to my car was a stark reminder of how far Karen and her homeowner association were willing to go. But it also served as a rallying point. Word of the incident spread quickly, and more neighbors began reaching out to me. Many shared their own stories of Karen's overreach, unreasonable fines, threats, and even attempts to force elderly residents out of their homes. It became clear that Karen's reign wasn't just about me, it was about controlling everyone. Tom and I decided it was time to go public. We contacted a local news station, and they were eager to cover the story. The day the crew arrived, Karen's expression was priceless. She stormed over to the reporter, demanding to know why they were in her community. "We're here to document claims of harassment and abuse by the homeowner association," the reporter replied calmly, the camera rolling. Karen's face turned an alarming shade of red. "This is private property. You have no right to be here." "Actually," I interjected, rolling up beside them, "we do. The community's public spaces are fair game, and the First Amendment protects us. You'd know that if you weren't so busy abusing your power." Karen stormed off, but the damage was done. The news report aired that evening, showing the vandalized car, the surveillance cameras, and interviews with sympathetic neighbors. The story went viral, and suddenly, Karen's carefully constructed image of authority began to crumble. The public exposure emboldened more residents to come forward. A group of them organized a petition to remove Karen from the Homeowner Association Board. In just a few days, they collected over 100 signatures, enough to force a special election. Karen didn't take the challenge lying down. Flyers appeared on every doorstep, accusing me of being a troublemaker and a liar. She even attempted to involve the city council, claiming the petition was invalid. But her efforts backfired. The city council, already wary of Karen's antics, launched an investigation into the homeowner association's activities. Meanwhile, Tom and I prepared for the restraining order hearing. The evidence we'd gathered was overwhelming. The illegal surveillance, the vandalism, and the internal documents exposing Karen's targeting tactics. When the day of the hearing arrived, I felt a mix of anxiety and determination. The courtroom was packed. Karen sat with her lawyer, a smug-looking man who seemed convinced of their victory. But as the hearing progressed, their confidence began to waver. Tom methodically presented our case, piece by piece, leaving no room for doubt. The turning point came when we introduced testimony from a former homeowner association board member. She admitted under oath that Karen had pressured the board into approving the cameras and the unauthorized construction on my property. Her statement was the final nail in the coffin. The judge ruled in my favor, granting the restraining order and ordering the homeowner association to remove the cameras and halt all further actions against me. Karen's lawyer tried to argue, but the judge cut him off. "This behavior is unacceptable," she said firmly. "The court will not tolerate such blatant abuse of power." As I left the courthouse, a group of neighbors greeted me with cheers and hugs. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of hope. But the battle wasn't over. Karen was still on the board, and the special election was fast approaching. In the days leading up to the vote, I worked tirelessly with the group of residents who had spearheaded the petition. We went door to door, sharing stories and encouraging others to stand up to Karen's tyranny. The community began to unite in a way I hadn't seen before. On the day of the election, the atmosphere was electric. Residents lined up to cast their votes, many of them wearing buttons that read, "Take back our community." Karen hovered near the voting area, her smile strained as she tried to engage with voters. But it was clear her grip on the community was slipping. That evening, the results were announced. By a landslide, Karen was removed from the board. Cheers erupted, and for the first time, the community felt like a true neighborhood. The victory was bittersweet. While Karen's reign was over, the damage she'd done would take time to repair. The new board pledged to review all of the homeowner association's policies and ensure transparency moving forward. For me, it was a reminder that standing up for what's right is never easy, but it's always worth it. As I sat on my porch that night, watching the lights of my newly reconnected home, I felt a sense of peace. The battle had been long and grueling, but I had won. Karen and her oppressive tactics were gone, and I'd reclaimed not just my home, but my dignity. Karen's removal from the Homeowner Association Board marked a turning point for the community, but it didn't mean the fight was completely over. In the days following her ouster, the new board faced a mountain of work, undoing Karen's policies, addressing residents' grievances, and rebuilding trust among the neighbors. I found myself unexpectedly at the center of it all, not just as the catalyst for change, but as a voice of reason that people were beginning to rely on. The first order of business for the new board was dismantling the surveillance system. Contractors arrived early one morning, removing the invasive cameras Karen had installed. Watching them go was a bittersweet moment. They'd been a symbol of control and fear, and their removal felt like reclaiming a piece of our freedom. But not everything was resolved so easily. Karen wasn't the type to go quietly. She'd been spotted meeting with a lawyer, the same one who'd represented her during the restraining order hearing, and rumors swirled that she was planning to sue the board for wrongful removal. The new board members were understandably nervous, but I reminded them that the community support was solid. Together, we'd built a strong case against her, and the evidence was undeniable. Meanwhile, I turned my attention to repairing the damage Karen had done to my property. With Tom's help, I filed claims against the Homeowner Association for the vandalism and unauthorized construction. The board quickly approved reimbursement, eager to make amends and avoid further conflict. It felt good to see accountability in action, but it didn't erase the months of stress and hardship I'd endured. One day, as I was overseeing repairs to my wheelchair ramp, a neighbor named Linda approached me. She'd been one of Karen's staunchest supporters, always defending the homeowner association's actions and dismissing my complaints. "I owe you an apology," she said, her voice hesitant but sincere. "I didn't realize how bad things had gotten. I thought Karen was just trying to keep the community nice. But I see now that she went too far." Her words caught me off guard, but I appreciated them. "It's not easy to stand up and admit when you're wrong," I said. "Thank you. That means a lot." As the weeks passed, the community began to heal. The new board implemented fairer policies, including a complete overhaul of the fine system and stricter oversight of board decisions. They also organized a series of town hall meetings, giving residents a platform to voice their concerns and suggestions. The meetings were lively and sometimes heated, but they marked a significant step toward transparency and collaboration. For me, the experience was transformative. What had started as a personal battle against injustice had grown into something much bigger. I realized I had a knack for advocacy and a passion for helping others find their voices. When several neighbors suggested I run for a seat on the homeowner association board, I decided to give it serious thought. The final chapter of Karen's story came unexpectedly. One evening, as I was sitting on my porch enjoying the quiet, she appeared at the edge of my driveway. She looked different, smaller, less sure of herself. For a moment I considered asking her to leave, but something in her expression stopped me. "I came to apologize," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't respond immediately, unsure of what to say. "Why now?" I finally asked. Karen sighed, looking down at her hands. "I let things get out of control. I thought I was protecting the community, but I see now that I hurt people instead. I'm sorry for what I put you through." Her words felt genuine, and though forgiveness didn't come easily, I knew it was the right thing to do. "Thank you," I said. "I hope you've learned from this." She nodded and walked away, leaving me with a strange sense of closure. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it was a step toward putting the past behind us. In the end, the fight against Karen and the homeowner association wasn't just about me reclaiming my rights. It was about standing up to abuse of power and proving that even one person can make a difference. The community had rallied together, finding strength in unity and hope for a better future. When election day came, I officially joined the homeowner association board. My goal wasn't just to prevent another Karen from rising to power, but to ensure that everyone in the community had a voice. As I looked around the room during my first meeting as a board member, I felt a sense of pride and purpose I hadn't known before. This was my home and I was ready to protect it,